I want to talk about something else really important. It was something that I brought up in a past podcast, but I kind of was ahead of the curve on the news cycle. That is Sound of Freedom. Now, if you don't know what Sound of Freedom is about the story of Tim Ballard. Tim Ballard is a member of my church, and so I heard a lot about him growing up. He's a Christian. What he does essentially is he goes to Latin American countries mostly. I think it's expanded across the world at this point because a lot of it's going on in China, but it started in Latin America where he would go and essentially act as if he was a pedophile. He would act like someone who wanted to buy children in sex slavery, and then he would set them free and he would bust those people. Why I partnered with the title sponsor of this podcast, Gulag America. Often terms that gulag is referring to that literal prison, but as we've discussed on this show, we are trying to keep that away from the United States. It is the warning and not the wish for a limited time only. If you use my code JoshCar10 at gulagamerica.com, you will get stellar apparel. There are hoodies, there are shirts. I have more coming in the mail probably because I love them so much. I was just on a trip. I wore it. I was feeling great in it. They're always very form-fitting. They look great. There's sizes for everybody, men and women. Again, if you use my code JoshCar10 at Gulag America, you will get 10% off the apparel there. It comes very quickly. Great apparel for the best patriots. Again, that's JoshCar10 at gulagamerica.com. And so Sound of Freedom is a new film that came out. Jim Caviezel is the star of it. If you don't know who Jim Caviezel is, he was the lead in The Count of Monte Cristo, as well as Christ in The Passion of the Christ. Really good actor. He does a phenomenal job. I had the opportunity a few months ago to go to a pre-screening here in Utah. And so I had the opportunity to feel the weight of that story in the theater a little bit ahead of time. And so I talked about it. Now it has been released in theaters. I encourage all of you to go see it. A lot of people have paid it forward and actually donated for people to go see it for free. So if you go to Sound of Freedom, their website, you might be able to get a free ticket if you can't pay for it. If you feel inspired to donate for yourself, you can go to that same website and buy it forward for other people. Recently, it's been in the news cycle. And the reason why it's been in the news cycle is because they've been talking about it. What really got it going is there was a man that went on CNN recently. I don't even know his name. I honestly don't want to say his name. The reason why is because I don't get upset too often. I'm happy to debate issues. But what he said was very upsetting to me. And I think the reason why is because we're talking about kids here. He went on and basically disparaged Tim Ballard for saving kids from sex slavery and said that it was like QAnon's conspiracy. He was talking about how he was just doing it for him. And it was crazy how someone so ignorant could go on CNN, a very large news organization, and spout off such lies without accountability. So I wanted to talk a little bit about it. This is the problem with American politics today. And luckily, Tim Ballard and Jim Caviezel have been going on other news organizations and speaking against that. I think most people can look at what he's doing with Project Underground Railroad, which is his charity that saves kids, and can see, even if it may not be a perfect charity, and no charity is, they can see all the good that they're doing and that this guy on CNN was full of crap. But the problem with American politics is today is that you have your side, and then by like that assumptive property, the other side must be the opposite. Like the left and right very rarely agree. If one is pro-gun, the other has to be anti-gun. One is pro-abortion, the other has to be anti-abortion. Pro-immigration, anti-immigration. It feels like there has to, like every action has its equal opposite reaction. And that feels like it's true for the two-party system in the United States. This is the case with this issue as well. What it seems is that somehow the conservatives have fallen on the side of saving kids from sex slavery, and then automatically the left is against it, which is so sad to me. And it doesn't have to happen on either side. If the left is doing something really good, the right can just do it too. They don't need to do the opposite. Somehow the left has found themselves on the opposite side of sex trafficking. It doesn't make any sense on its face. But when you look into the deeper incentives, it actually does make sense. And I want to talk about it. Basically, to end sex trafficking, you have to end illegal immigration, right? Most of the sex trafficking is happening in between states, oftentimes in between the United States and Mexico. And so if you end illegal immigration, you're not going to have sex trafficking between the United States and Mexico. Now, it's true that it's still going to happen in between other countries, but at least the United States can wipe their hands of that and still help in privatized ways in other countries. But Democrats are betting on the fact that they can continue to print money and give that money in the form of social welfare to illegal immigrants when they come across the border. They then oftentimes have plans to either give them votes, like allow them, like in DACA, for instance, and make them citizens so that they can vote. Or even if they gain citizenship through their own path, they're still going to vote Democrat because they were given these handouts. That is the incentive structure, right? That's what they're trying to do. There was a political philosophy for a long time that as America continued to let in immigrants, it would become impossible for Republicans to win. Not fully true, we found out, especially when you see in Florida how a lot of Cubans, a lot of people who have rejected communism in their lives are voting Republican. But in any case, Democrats have this incentive structure and this desire to print money and give social welfare to illegal immigrants and to continue to let them across the border. They are willing to endanger millions, and it is millions, of kids in order to do this who are being trafficked. At the very beginning of the movie in Sound of Freedom, it shows a little boy, and that's a true story, who is trafficked across the border. So that's just one example of many times that happens. I think it was in San Diego from Tijuana. And I know this is true because I've experienced this in my own life. I want to tell a story from my own life. I brought it up in a past podcast, but I want to speak to it again, especially since my audience has grown a little bit since then. For those of you who didn't know, I used to be a missionary in Washington. I was Spanish speaking, and so I was involved mostly in immigrants, mostly from Mexico. And it was fascinating talking to them how they had gotten there. Many of them had gotten there through legal ways because they were on work visas, because there's a lot of farm work to be done there. Most of the people that were coming there were from ranches in Mexico. So in many ways, they were bolstering the Washington economy through farm work. However, there were many people who came across illegally. I remember distinctly once there was a man I went to visit. I believe he was actually came across on a work visa, but he lived in this super nasty shack in the middle of a farm. He was in charge of some cows, I believe, there. And we went and visited him, and he said, yeah, this new kid kind of showed up. We're always looking for people, of course, to spread the gospel, to spread Christianity with as missionaries. And so we're always asking people, are there anyone else? You know, and he mentioned this kid. He said, yeah, this new kid just moved here. I said, cool, like, how old is he? And he was like, he's 18. We're like, wow, okay. Where'd he move from? He said, Mexico. We're like, how did he get here? Like, it's just him, 18. Essentially, we met with this kid and he told us his story. How it works is that he, as an 18-year-old boy, had to give a down payment to the cartel to cross the border. Now, I don't know what this down payment was, but it couldn't have been a lot of money. He was 18 in Mexico. But in any case, he gave a down payment, probably $50 to the cartel. They let him across, used it as bribery money. And then he was then paying the cartel back. And the price for his freedom was about $10,000. The collateral for this freedom was his family. He had to give up the location of his family. The cartel knew exactly where his family was. And so if he didn't make his payments, the cartel would go kill his family. The cartel also was involved in MS-13, the gang in the United States, and had contacts to where he lived. And so this boy was living in constant fear, had to work a certain amount of hours, or he wasn't going to be able to save his family and stay across the border. His plan was to pay for his family, once he paid off the cartel, to continue to work with the cartel to get the rest of his family across. Now, this boy got across through the cartel and through money because he was 18, but there are many people who are not as fortunate as this boy. And I use the word fortunate tongue-in-cheek because it wasn't fortunate at all. A lot of them are in sex trafficking. If he had been 14, the cartel the reason why I'm sharing this story is because the cartel has incredible pull around the border to broker deals. If they can do it with this 18-year-old boy, they can do it with a 14-year-old girl. And so it's my hope that we will stand up against this. We will end illegal immigration, shut down the border so that we cannot allow the cartel to use people, whether it's through sex slavery or labor slavery, as it was for the case of this boy that I met. So a lot of people have criticized Sound of Freedom because they're saying, you're just going to see a movie and you feel really sad. But the reality is when we go and see movies that are emotionally impactful, it inspires change in us. We'll make a stand. We will change the way we think. We'll donate to better causes. We will support ending illegal immigration. And so even though seeing the movie is not the end, it is helpful. I've always been pro wall. I've always been anti illegal immigration, but seeing that movie inspired a different change in me. That's why I'm talking about it now. I hope that everyone will be inspired to do the same. Go and see Sound of Freedom right now. They're not sponsoring me in any way. I just feel impressed to talk about it because of how important this issue is and how many children are being affected.